The United Kingdom is experiencing one of its hottest summers ever, with record temperatures of 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Normal summer temperatures for the UK never rise above 77 degrees Fahrenheit, causing this heat wave to be issued as a red extreme heat wave warning by the UK's National Weather Service.
This morning, we issued a rare red weather warning. This is for extreme heat on Monday and Tuesday, covering a large part of England. Amber warnings have been extended across Wales and into parts of Scotland. These are unprecedented temperatures. We're talking about extreme heat that's likely to cause some serious problems.
Towns across England have seen homes and businesses destroyed by wildfires, with London's mayor blaming the event on the consequences of climate change.
This consequence of climate change, this excessive heat approaching 40 degrees and exceeding it, these sort of fires we're seeing today could become the norm rather than the exception.
It's so hot that even Nintendo issued a warning on Twitter advising users not to operate their Switch device in degrees higher than 35 Celsius, equivalent to 95 degrees. You can't even sit inside and play Switch.
That now I'm affected now.
Right, now it has finally affected Robbie. So Deputy Editor at Carbon Brief, Simon Evans, joins us now to update us on the weather across the pond. Welcome.
Morning.
So, what are we looking at today? Yesterday, record-breaking heat across the country. I had heard some hopeful notes from people that there could be thunderstorms coming that could knock it down a little bit here and there. How are people handling it today?
Yeah, today's. It's still pretty uncomfortable on the tube, on the underground. But in terms of outside temperatures, we're back down to what would historically have been considered quite a hot day in the UK, so more like 27 degrees, but certainly nothing compared to yesterday.
Right.
And certainly Nintendo players may have been affected, but the consequences are pretty serious.
And my understanding is that in a lot of Europe, maybe the UK as well, but please fill me in, air conditioning is not nearly as widely available as it is here in the States. Is that true? Are there a lot of people without air conditioning having to deal with this heat?
Yeah, so it's extremely unusual outside of commercial properties to see air conditioning installed. So I think roughly only 5% of homes in the UK have air conditioning. It's really not something that most people would consider even having.
And what do we know so far about the consequences? When you get a heat wave like this, particularly in an area not used to it, you're going to have people die. And you're often going to see fires break out. So what do we know so far about what happened in the UK yesterday?
Yeah, so in terms of deaths due to extreme heat, we won't know the numbers on that for some time, but in previous heat waves in the UK, thousands of people have died, more than over and above what you would have expected in a normal week. We've seen rail tracks buckling and services cancelled. We've seen flights cancelled at Luton Airport because the runway was melting. And just even in terms of personal experience, close friends of ours had to take their 9-month-old baby to hospital because of heat stroke. So this is affecting everyone around the country in ways that weren't really expected. And I would say, having been tracking the heat wave across Europe quite closely over the past few days, obviously there have been severe forest fires across Spain, Portugal, France. Even having watched all of that happening, over the last week, I still really wasn't expecting to see very widespread outbreaks of wildfire in the UK across multiple UK locations in London, but across other parts of the country as well.
Yeah, I didn't either. We're ignorant over here in the States that there significant forest coverage in the UK is something I wouldn't have necessarily known. Are the fires still going on today, or have they been put out? Do you know?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have an update for you on that. A lot of these are fires in grassland as well, so it's not just forests. Mm-hmm. We do historically have a history of forest fires, but typically relatively isolated, relatively infrequent. To see the number and intensity of fires affecting residential areas as well as more kind of countryside locations, that's really unusual.
And last year's UN IPCC report, as I'm sure you know, finally came to the conclusion that these types of extreme weather events were being driven by climate change. That was the thing that was that was the missing piece that the IPCC had yet to kind of conclude. They now have concluded it. Nobody really questions that outside of some fringe elements. How is this playing politically in the UK? Is there anything of a wake up call here? What do you expect to see to be the fallout of this?
Yeah. So just to recap for your listeners, the IPCC in its sixth assessment report, so it was virtually certain, that the number and intensity of extreme weather events had increased as a result of climate change, and the UK's Met Office, its chief scientist, said yesterday that the extreme heat, the record-setting 40.3 degrees in centigrade, nearly 105 in Fahrenheit, he said that would have been virtually impossible without all the greenhouse gases that we've added to the atmosphere. So there's really no doubt that the heat wave that we saw yesterday in the UK, was intensified and effectively made possible by warming. In terms of the political consequences, it's coming at a really interesting time politically, because we're obviously in the midst of the Tory leadership contest. We're looking for someone to replace Boris Johnson as leader of the Conservative Party and therefore as UK Prime Minister. And actually, a number of the candidates to replace Boris Johnson have been really kind of flip-flopping on climate, their commitment to the UK's net zero target. Even now, it's pretty unclear how fully committed. All of the remaining candidates have now said that they would stick to net zero by 2050, but in terms of their practical commitment to that, how much they would really follow through on that pledge, it's really pretty unclear at this stage.
Because my understanding, though, is that the UK's political system, it's not, the issue of climate change is not quite as polarized as it is here in the US, where you have obviously a significant number of Republicans who want a very different or don't want many of the climate policies the Democrats do. It's a little bit less like that. In the UK, there's more support for doing among the Conservative Party and doing also what Labour wants. Is that true? Is that still true? Do you think that's going to change, given what's going on with the leadership race?
Yeah, so it is the case that there's overwhelming public support for taking action on climate change, and that that's not true only with the public at large, but also within Conservative voters specifically, and within specific different constituencies of Conservative voters. So pretty much whichever way you cut it up, there's strong support for climate action, and we've enjoyed this long period in the UK of cross-party consensus on tackling climate change. And we've seen under a series of Conservative-led governments since 2010, the UK has continued to cut its emissions, continued to build more renewables and so on. Whether that's going to change now, there's certainly a vocal minority within the Conservative Party and within the sort of media allies of that minority, I guess you would say, that has been attempting to kind of make this into a wedge issue. They've been attempting to kind of associate climate action with the kind of broader culture wars narrative, criticising even just like 1 or 2 days before the heat wave that we've just experienced, that with all of the consequences that we already talked about, they're publishing comment articles describing the Met Office as woke climate alarmists. So there's a pretty concerted effort to create this kind of wedge issue, more similar to what you have in the US. But I think so far there's no evidence that that's going to wash with the public.
All right. Poor timing for that attempted argument. Simon, thanks so much for filling us in. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you.
All right, and we'll have more Rising right after this.